Good afternoon. Court is in session in the matter of the State of Wyoming versus Cameron Paul. Criminal action number CR 2012-159. Is the state ready to proceed?
We are.
Is the defense ready to proceed?
Yes, we are.
We would begin, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. You've been duly empaneled in this matter to consider the evidence and keep an open mind until you've heard all the evidence in the case. Please pay attention to what's going on, and we will begin the proceedings with opening statements by the parties. Opening statements are not evidence, but they are going to provide you an outline, a guide, if you will, of what the parties intend that the evidence will show. Counsel, may I have that seating chart? Pass it over to the defense table and, or excuse me, the state's table. Until I have that, if you would just introduce yourself for the court's benefit when you address the court or the jury. Opening statement for the state.
Yes. I'm completely new to this. Sorry, where do I?
Address the jury from the podium.
Okay.
And if you need to, I understand there aren't any exhibits or demonstrative aids really allowed.
That's correct.
So you are allowed to move. You don't have to hold the podium as, you know, but stay as close to the podium as you can.
Thank you.
And your name, sir?
Abraham Tunison.
Counsel. Please proceed.
Thank you. Terry Brush was a businessman. He lived alone after his divorce from his wife, which separated him from his child, Gary, at a very young age. Years later, not long after being reunited with his child, now a fully grown adult, he was successful and still working to keep his status as an affluent citizen of the community. In that time, Mr. Brush was involved in a pyramid scheme in which he involved people, he encouraged them to invest and make money in the short term with benefactions from new investors until the investors went out. However, he kept his composure and kept in touch with others in town in an effort to repair his relationships. He still visited people's businesses and acted calmly and politely. He felt adversely towards the mistake, as the testimony provided by Gary Brush would support. He damaged his own business and reputation and honor, something he held very highly. One of these people that he paid gravely for him was Cameron Paul, a person that, unlike other casualties of the scheme, made the mistake of investing everything he had amounted to with his business, $250,000, because of the corrupt actions taken by Mr. Brush. Terry Brush had vehicles that required specialized mechanics and tools to work on them, such as his regenerative braking system on his $90,000 electric Plymouth Charge. Paul's mechanic shop happened to be the specialized mechanic shop. Brush was wary that he hurt Paul greatly, but Paul had not retaliated in any way, so he felt at least somewhat comfortable taking his vehicle to him. That morning, Mr. Brush needed his charge serviced and took it to Mr. Paul's garage to have it looked at. After having it driven over with Gary that morning, his son, talking about getting a new car with him, he went to get a hot dog from Mickey Frank's, the hot dog vendor just outside the garage while his car was being worked on. Cameron Paul, a man who was known for not necessarily working much on the actual vehicles in the shop and instead leaving them for his staff, was witnessed getting under the car after all the other staff were finished. Cameron Paul is, even without having touched many cars in recent history, an experienced mechanic with a lot of know-how. The evidence will show that he has a notorious temper. Paul had all the means to alter the state of the brakes, and the opportunity was presented to him on a golden platter. This is why Cameron Paul is accused of first-degree murder, an act of murder which is premeditated with malice aforethought. He had reason, he had the chance, and he had the ability. This is what the evidence will show beyond reasonable doubt today. He knew his actions would end in a catastrophe and carried out his action, causing another death as a byproduct of his hatred. During Cameron Paul's work, there was a physical altercation with an employee of his, Dakota Jacobs, who began shoving Mr. Brush without prior intimidation. Jacobs was simply a disgruntled employee and seeing and having to service a vehicle belonging to a man responsible for much turmoil in his life, another victim of Mr. Brush's pyramid scheme. Terry Brush was distracted. Once the fight had come to its no harm done conclusion, Mr. Brush was walked back to his car and apologized to by Paul, who was all smiles and expressions of regret as he paid and got in with his son and drove away. After dropping off his son and picking up his acquaintance, Coco Rashman, he was driving to an unknown destination where his brakes, as our expert witness Marty Andretti will tell you, finally ceased to function and he was forced to speed through a T intersection and crash into a utility pole, launching him 30 feet through his windshield into his death, all of which was witnessed by our officer witness Alex Brown and accompanying officer Marissa Wright. We will be offering the witness is Alex Brown, a police officer on duty and responsible for reporting the actual events involved in the crash. Marty Andretti, a specialty car expert, especially on today's vehicle in question, the Plymouth Charge, and Gary Brush, Terry Brush's son, who will assist in confirming the relationship between Paul and Brush. I close.
Thank you. Defense?
Your Honor. My name is Logan James Fox.
Fox, you may proceed.
Picture this. After going to your place of business just as you would every other day, you are presented with a horrendous claim that you took another man's life. This is precisely the case with responsible business owner Cameron Paul. Through speculation and circumstance alone, Cameron Paul has found himself to be the target of such a dubious accusation as murder. The murder of Terry Brush, a man no more fit to operate a vehicle than a child. It was through Brush's dishonesty and foolishness that Cameron Paul was found in the crosshairs of the law. Officer Alex Brown started this investigation under the suspicion that Terry Brush's vehicle had suffered mechanical malfunctions or had been tampered with. Now, how could any seasoned officer of the law start as serious an investigation as that relating to homicide under suspicion? Cameron Paul was nothing short of a self-made man whom with unparalleled determination and effort grew from a humble occupation and Cedar while you were locked up. You'll hear expert testimony confirming the presence of a dangerous amount of the chemical aberranium in Mr. Brush's bloodstream as far as 2 days after his passing, amounts dangerous enough to induce severe chest complications. Officer Alex Brown states that Mr. Brush was speeding through the intersection at which he crashed, going nearly 20 miles over the speed limit. At that, phone records confirmed that he was texting while driving no more than a minute before the crash occurred. All this being said, the only reasonable deduction anyone could make about the cause of Mr. Brush's demise is that it was the result of his own lack of foresight. Mr. Brush's wrongful conduct of business affected most everyone throughout Carter City. He had enemies all over, and there were plenty of other people affected far more severely than Cameron. Cameron's cars has a multitude of employees with easy access to any vehicle coming in, and Cameron's conduct in his shop was nothing short of standard shop procedure, making sure that his employees did their job well. The prosecution will likely outline the supposed mechanical failures of the brush vehicle. However, Officer Brown admits that at the scene of the accident, he got under the vehicle and moved components around, pulling and tugging wires. Plus, the severity of the crash could just as easily have damaged the components of the brush vehicle. In the end, based on the shortcomings of this investigation, as well as the lack of evidence to incriminate my client, the only sensible conclusion to arrive at is that there is not enough here to find Cameron guilty. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. And, I've been told that I can take timeouts, so timeout. Both very good, structured descriptions of the facts. And like most attorneys, when you are presented with the first opportunities to present something in court, you want to have that crutch, that paper, with all of your words written on it in case you forget it. I did it, and was from in here, or more extemporaneous. It always came out more effectively than if I read something to the judge or the jury. You know these. Alex Brown, Andretti, Gary Brush. You could put those three things on your paper and you would know exactly what you're gonna have them say. I mean, in general. So that when you're going down your list, you just say, okay, here's where I talk about Alex Brown. Here's where I talk about Andretti. And just talk about it. It will be more effective and it will include fewer words. Both of you really, those openings were dense. And it's hard when you're nervous to slow down. So when you're not reading something, you can't read it as fast. Or you read it faster than you would be able to say it, from just what you know. So it becomes more understandable for the jury. So think about those things when you're moving forward in the competition. And with that, State, are you prepared to call your first witness?
I'd like to call Alex Brown to the stand.
Mr. Brown, please come forward and be sworn. Would you raise your right hand? You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings, so help you God.
I do.
Please be seated.
Your Honor, my name is Catalina Gonzalez. May I proceed?
Yes, your name, counsel.
Can you please state your name for the court?
My name is Alex Brown.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Brown?
Yes, I've been with the Carter County Sheriff's Department for 9 years. I got my associate's degree from Carter County Community College in criminal justice. After that, I joined the Sheriff's Department, and part of my training included going to the Wyoming Peace Officers Training Academy. While I was there, I was taught how to work a vehicle investigation.
What is your connection to this case?
Not only was I the lead investigative officer in this accident and subsequent homicide investigation, I was also an eyewitness to the accident, which led to Mr. Brush's death.
Where were you at when you saw the wreck?
I was at the intersection of 19th and Converse.
Mr. Brown, could you please explain what you saw?
Yes. A red Plymouth Charge went through a red light, veered to the right, and slammed into a utility pole, ejecting one passenger 30 feet onto the roadway.
Was anything unusual?
Yes, the brake lights illuminated as the vehicle neared the intersection, but there was no evidence that the brakes had been activated.
What did you do next?
I pulled my patrol vehicle up next to the accident, and I called for backup and medical personnel.
What did you do next?
I approached the witness, or the occupant who had been ejected from the vehicle.
Did you identify who that person was, Mr. Brown?
Yes, I identified them as Terry Brush.
How did you know for sure that it was Terry Brush?
Although he was covered in blood, he was a very recognizable man. He had been in the newspapers and on television a lot recently due to his appearance.
Was Mr. Brush alive at this time?
Yes, he had a faint pulse.
Did you begin your investigation, Mr. Brown?
I did.
What did you do in the course of your investigation?
First things first, I searched the vehicle.
What did you find in the vehicle?
Apart from a number of personal items, an umbrella, and so on, I found a receipt from Cameron's Cars.
What was the receipt dated?
March 12, 2012, the same day as the accident.
What was the purpose of the visit to Cameron's house?
It said only services.
In your investigation, what led you to believe the brakes weren't working properly?
As I said earlier, the brake lights were illuminated as the car approached the intersection. The brake lights on a Plymouth Charge are very easy to see. They stretch across the entire back of the car as well as being on the front. And due to this, I did not understand why the brakes were big.
Did you ever look under the car, Mr. Brown?
I did.
What did you see?
Well, I did have to move some wires, but I was careful. I've been trained in a procedure when investigating a vehicle accident. I was able to notice that there were loose brake cables and a loose battery cable.
What happened next?
That was well, after that, I asked, wait, could you restate the question, please?
What did you do after you left the scene?
After I left the scene, that was pretty much it for the day. But the next day, I went to Cameron's Cars. While I was there, I attempted to question Mr. Cameron Paul, the defendant, about the accident and the services that his business had done on the Brush vehicle.
What happened at Cameron's Cars, Mr. Brown?
As I questioned, well, first things first, I went in and I told Mr. Paul that there had been an accident and that Mr. Brush had died. He turned away and mumbled something. I think it was, "That's what you get," or the like. And he then turned back to me and said that he had no knowledge of his business having ever serviced Brush's vehicle, which I thought was strange because it had been in there just the day before.
Then what happened?
As I continued to attempt to question him, he began to get angry and defensive, put a finger in my face and told me that I had to leave and that if I wanted to continue to investigate, I would need a warrant. He then kicked me out of the shop, went back inside and locked the doors.
Did you speak to anyone else while you were at Cameron Cars, Mr. Paul?
Yes, I spoke to Mickey Franks, the hot dog vendor who has a stand on the corner near Cameron's Cars.
What was said between you and Mr. Franks?
Well, first thing I asked him, did you see a Plymouth Charge, an electric car matching the description of Mr. Brush's at Cameron Paul's auto shop anytime over the past few weeks? He said yes, it had been there just the day before.
Did Mr. Franks say anything else while you were there, Mr. Brown?
Yeah, he said that he noticed that Mr. Paul had personally gotten under the car and done some work.
Why did he say that was worth mentioning to you?
He said it was strange because Mr. Paul is not known for doing a whole lot of work on the cars themselves. He likes to kind of grandstand for the customers instead.
What happened next?
Before concluding my investigation, I talked to the son of the deceased, Mr. Gary Brush.
What does your report say about Gary Brush?
Gary Brush said that he was sitting in the customer service area waiting for his father's car to be released when he noticed that Mr. Paul had gotten under the vehicle. He said that he was under there for quite a while, actually. And after he said this, I drew a diagram at Brush about his life. Where Gary Brush saw the defendant get underneath the car.
Where did your investigation lead from there, Mr. Brown?
From there, I went back to the station and made arrangements for a mechanic expert to do a further investigation on the vehicle and the assumed brake failures.
What did Mr. Andretti's report conclude?
His report concluded that it would have been impossible for the brakes to have failed without having been tampered with.
So what happened after you got the results from Mr. Andretti's report, Mr. Brown?
The district attorney filed a homicide case, and I took the defendant into custody to face the charge of the death of Mr. Brush.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
My name is Isaac Lee.
Ms. Counselor, please do.
You witnessed the accident which led to Terry Brush's death, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And you saw Terry's vehicle driving at a high rate of
Yes.
Also, did Terry state that his brakes were not working?
Terry was dead.
Did he say anything was wrong?
Terry was dead.
Wasn't Mr. Brush reported to have grabbed his chest and stomped his leg down shortly before the impact?
He was.
Do you think this was an indication that Mr. Brush might have had a heart attack?
Possibly. I'm definitely no expert.
And could his something wrong statement have referred to chest pain?
Possibly.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Counselor. Redirect.
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Officer, you want to step down? Thank you. All right. Time out again. For purposes of direct examination, very good. The use of open-ended questions allowed your witness to go where the witness wanted to go, but you knew where it was a very good direct examination. You got some things into evidence that might not have come in had the defense objected. Objections, be aware that any time that a witness is trying to assign a statement to an out-of-court declarant, for the truth of what that declarant said, that is hearsay. So, for example, I talked to the hot dog vendor, and the hot dog vendor said the defendant got under the vehicle. reason they want to introduce that is to establish the truth that the defendant got under the vehicle, right? And it's by an out-of-court declarant who isn't here or could be here, isn't here now to say that's what he saw. So an objection on hearsay grounds is possible. Now, as a strategic matter, you may not want to object, because the jury, when they see somebody jumping up all the time, objecting to everything, they think you're trying to hide things from them. So if you don't dispute that fact, then don't object. But be aware that things like what the expert said in his report, again, it's what the expert's saying out of court. If you want to object to things like that, you can on hearsay grounds. So keep that in mind. The cross-examination, very good. I think you knew what questions you wanted to ask. You knew that if you tried to wiggle away from the answers, you had prior testimony and statements that you could use against him. One thing, be careful with it. Take your time and be precise about your question. Isn't it true that he was texting? Well, he said yes. But to the jury, texting when? Texting right as he's going through the stop sign? That's what the point you want to make. Just generally texting doesn't really make the point as strongly as you want. So, good job. State's next witness, please.
I call Marty Andretti. Your Honor, I'm Chelsea Binder, special prosecution for this case. May I proceed?
Yes, one more. Mr. Andretti, come forward and please be sworn. Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the proceedings of this matter?
I do.
Please sit down. You may proceed, Counselor. Thank you.
Can you please introduce yourself? And tell us how you are related to this case.
Okay. I'm Marty Andretti. I am an expert on today's vehicle in question, the Plymouth Charge.
Your Honor, I offer Mr. Andretti as an expert witness for the state.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Andretti is been proffered and accepted as an expert witness in this matter. Please proceed.
Can you tell us a little bit about you and some of the degrees you have attained?
Absolutely. I got my undergraduate degree at the University of Padua in Italy, and then I immigrated to the United States and got my postgraduate degree at the University of Las Vegas, Nevada, in specialty car mechanics.
What are you currently doing in your work, and how did you get involved with Terry Brush?
I'm presently a private contractor for various car companies. I'm not related in any way to Mr. Brush in his private life or otherwise. I am only here as an expert witness.
Can you please explain a little bit about Mr. Brush's vehicle?
Yes. Mr. Brush's vehicle is a Plymouth Charge fully electric vehicle with a regenerative braking system. This is a system where instead of taking the friction that would just be used and wasted energy, saves that energy and charges back the electric vehicle. It is a primary braking system. The secondary braking system is the traditional friction system. So if one system fails, then the other one is absolutely there for backup.
I understand you know about the Plymouth battery. Could you explain the basics of the battery and how the battery is charged?
Yes. There are several battery packs positioned in the bottom center of the vehicle in a T formation to maximize efficiency. These batteries are there to power the contactors, which would electrically supply the RBS system, the any other circumstance.
What happens to the electricity in the Plymouth and the electricity going to the brakes?
The signals that you would send by putting your foot down on the brake pedal would cause a signal to go from the car to the brakes to begin the regenerative braking system, so that way the car's primary braking might begin.
For the accident, I understand that you took a look at the vehicle immediately prior to the accident. Can you tell us what you noticed about the brakes?
The brakes were tampered with, absolutely, there is no question. The regenerative braking system uses 5 contactors, 1 for each tire and 1 to the main system. Each of these had a residue on them made of a combination of silicon and rubber. As the engine heats up, it slowly puts a barrier between the contactor and the actual braking mechanism. It's not very much, but it makes it sensitive enough that if you were to go over a very slight bump, it would turn off the regenerative braking system, leaving you only for the friction system. However, the friction system is also eaten through with a slow-acting acid. It was man-made, it was put there by human, it does not naturally occur.
I have a document, may I approach the witness? Do you recognize this?
I do.
Do you know what this is?
Yes.
During further testing, has led you to notice more about what the material actually was. Can you explain more about that?
Yes. The acid used on the friction brake system was a slow-acting nitric acid, which I had not confirmed at the time of the affidavit, but I did know that it was manufactured, it was man-made, and that it would take a little bit of time to wear through in order to make the brakes, to proscribe the brakes from working.
To further inspection of the car, what else did you notice that failed?
Both the regenerative braking system, so the electricity would have failed on the way there and hit a small bump somewhere along the line, and the system between the braking lights and the actual brakes themselves are 2 different components. So the brake lights would have gone off, but the regenerative braking system would not. And because of the reduced connection between the friction brakes and the actual car itself, that would have also snapped and failed.
What evidence did you find on the metal?
On the metal, there was a substance that you might find on the outside of a light bulb as a kind of sealant that would occur over time as it heats up. As I mentioned before, it's a sort of white substance that, as it heats up, expands a little bit over time.
Based on the facts you just gave us in conducting a thorough inspection of your expertise, what can you confidently say about what happened to Mr. Brush's vehicle?
Mr. Brush's vehicle was without any doubt at some point tampered with by someone that knew a lot about specialty mechanics. A normal,
Based on speculation.
He's been appointed as an expert.
Is that your objection?
Yes.
Speculation?
Hmm.
Your response?
He is an expert, he is allowed to speculate.
The objection is overruled, but because the expert has described the factual basis for his conclusion that someone who did this alleged tampering must have had substantial experience with these kinds of substances and the vehicle. So the fact that he's designated as an expert doesn't allow him to speculate, but he is allowed to base his conclusions on the findings that he has personally observed and his knowledge and experience. Objection overruled. Please proceed.
In your opinion, as a professional, what do you think happened at the time of the accident when Mr. Brush was driving?
I believe that the silicon-based residue placed around the contactors for the brakes had expanded enough over that day that it hit a very small bump. There was an uneven road at some point, and it lost connection. And the power to the braking system died, and that the acid had also had enough time to wear away at the braking system, at the wiring, that it would have also failed to connect.
Your Honor, those are all my questions.
Cross-examination.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
You have a master's degree in electrical engineering, is that?
Vehicles as well as we can.
And do you know if the braking system was redesigned after you left Plymouth?
I'm certain it wasn't. They would have contacted me.
So you inspected the car which was involved in the accident which killed Terry Brush, that's correct?
I wasn't.
The vehicle came under your possession on May 30th, is that correct?
That is correct.
And the accident occurred on March 12th, is that also correct?
That is also correct.
So this vehicle was unaccounted for over 2 months?
It was in a secure location with the police.
There. You found a slow-acting compound on the cables to the battery and the brakes, is that correct?
That is correct.
This slow-acting compound had over 2 months to act on these brakes, is that correct?
It doesn't take very long for them to act.
Do you know how long it would take for them to act?
A couple of hours.
Could you narrow it down any more?
An estimation. It depends on the weather.
Without investigating it at the time, you couldn't have known if the brakes had any effect in an hour and 40 minutes that it took between the car being serviced and that wreck.
There's a good chance that it did take effect.
So you can't possibly be positive that the brakes were not working or working at the time of the accident, can you, Mr. Confetti?
That is correct.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Correct.
I don't know how to use the
Mr. Andretti, you may step down. Thank you. State's next witness.
Terry Brush, the stand.
Mr. Brush, even though you're now a different person, you know you're still under oath?
I do.
All right, please proceed.
I'm Melissa Shanahan, with the team. Can you tell the court your name and how you were related to the case?
Yes, my name is Gary Brush, and I'm Terry Brush's son.
How old are you?
I'm 23 years old.
Do you live with the victim?
I do. Did.
Did you and your father have a pretty good relationship?
We weren't enemies. We were just getting to know each other.
What did you understand about your father's business dealings?
I didn't know very much at the time. I know that he was working very hard to give me money. I got into a lot of trouble with the law when I was younger, so he would have to get his lawyer to help me out.
Did you know Cameron Paul?
No, he knew my dad mostly.
May I approach a witness?
May.
Do you have plans?
I do as the diagram I drew for Alex Brown. The X's on the car near the wheels represent each place that I observed Cameron Paul being near and working around when I saw him that day.
Did your dad take his personal car to Cameron's?
Not often. Today was a little bit unusual. Maybe he just wanted to get a hot dog.
What were you doing the morning of the accident?
I had been speaking with my father about getting a new car. I wanted something newer.
What did you see while you were in the waiting area?
The most unusual thing that I saw that day was Cameron Paul getting underneath my father's car. He works there, of course, and he owns the business, but he's notorious. Everyone in town knows that he doesn't really work on the vehicles. He's just there for show. I wasn't sure why he was there, but he got into the car and looked like he was under there for long enough for me to notice. He went underneath each of the wheels, and that's about as far as that goes.
Was there anything unusual at the shop assembly?
There was a scuffle between Dakota Jacobs and my father as well, I suppose.
Did you see Cameron get under the car?
Yes.
How long would you estimate that Cameron spent under the car?
I didn't have a timer on me, but long enough definitely for him to have been doing more than just looking at it.
What did you do when you left the shop?
I didn't question anything. I got in the car with my father and he dropped me off at my house, our house.
That's it?
Thank you. Cross-examination.
I proceed, Your Honor.
May.
You are the son of Terry Brush, is this correct?
That is correct.
And you were with your father when his car was being serviced at my client's shop. Yes, or can you answer yes or no?
There's no reason for him to.
But he chose to take his car to Mr. Paul, is that correct?
That is correct.
This isn't the first time Mr. Paul has done work on your father's car, is it?
No.
So if Mr. Paul wanted to damage your father's vehicle, he had many other opportunities to do it, is that correct?
This is the first time since the scheme fell apart.
No further questions, Your Honor.
And redirect.
No.
Thank you, sir. You may step down. State's next witness.
We have no further witnesses.
So the state rests the defense.
We'd like to call our first witness, Forrest Spence.
Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Perhaps we could sneak in a recess.
Sure.
Before we pass it over to the.
Sure. Let's take a 5-minute recess.
All right.
Court's in recess.
I thought I had told him to go to the courthouse, so I just kind of dropped you guys off. I wasn't trying to. Anyway, thought, so I had to go to the city because that's where I live.
Oh,
So,
it's okay.
sorry
I
about
just
that.
saw everybody getting out and I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, so, sorry about that. That's not out there, I think. You can deliberate. Cross.
Before we come to order, and we're back in session, the matter of State versus Cameron Paul, and at the presence of counsel for the parties. State ready to resume?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense, may call its first witness.
We would like to call Farley Spence to the stand.
Mr. Spence, please come forward. Mr. Spence? Or Miss Spence? Farley could be Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and Mr. Spence?
I do.
Be seated. You may proceed, counsel.
All right. So why don't you tell the jury a little bit about your background, as well as who you are?
Well, my name is Farley Spence, and I am a professional pharmacist. And I'm 53, and I got my bachelor's degree in 1982, and then in 1985, I got my PhD in pharmacy.
Your Honor, I would like to recognize Farley Spence as an expert. So why are you here today?
Oh, wait, objection.
Hold on, counsel. Is there an objection?
Yes.
What is your objection?
On the grounds of being an expert, I don't believe that he is an expert in this case. He doesn't have an MD. He doesn't have an expert here. He's not a cardiologist or a medical examiner.
Okay.
She.
Counselor, what field are you proffering this witness to be an expert on?
Chemical toxicology as well, including aberrating.
Ms. Spence, do you have training in pharmacology?
In biochemistry.
And you're a pharmacist?
Yes.
Do you have training and expertise in the effect of medications or other chemicals on the human body?
Yes.
The court finds that the absence of a medical degree or other specialized training does not render her unqualified to be an expert. Those matters, if the state believes she lacks proper qualifications, can be part of your cross-examination and would go to the weight of her opinion as opposed to its admissibility. You may continue.
Thank you. So why are you here today?
Well, I'm here to talk about how Terry Brush had a heart attack in the car.
And I certainly hope you're being compensated for your efforts in this case.
Yes.
You stated that you had reviewed Terry Brush's medical records. What did you find within them?
Well, I found that there was nothing very unusual, like there were no drugs or alcohol, but there was traces of migraine medication Well, it said in the toxology report that I was looking at that he was taking too many pills of the fix your heart and fix your head.
And do you think that these chemicals in Mr. Brush's bloodstream could have been the cause of his accident?
Yes, I do.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
You have no evidence that Brush is taking fix your heart medication, do you? No. You can't easily mix up fix your head versus fix your heart medication, can you? Yes. So very likely then he took fix your heart medication prior to the accident? No. The outer aberranium cannot have came from fix your heart medication, is that correct?
True.
Is it correct that you know that the aberranium levels were normal? No. Can you pinpoint when exactly the heart attack happened? Right before the intersection. Objection.
Do you need a moment, counsel? You may confer with your co-counsel. Counsel, perhaps you'd like to come back to that.
There's no questions.
Be direct.
Yes, Your Honor.
Marley, what happens to aspirin over time?
Well, when alderanium is in your blood system, it breaks down over time.
And when was the autopsy of Mr. Brush performed?
48 hours after mortem.
So it's fair to say that Mr. Brush's level of aspirin were substantially higher at the time of his death.
Yes.
In your expert opinion, do you believe that those levels would be high enough to induce a heart attack or at least severe chest complications?
Yes, I do believe so.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step down. I'd like to call its next witness.
We would like to call Kurt Jacobs to stand.
Mr. Jacobs, please come forward and be sworn. You solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony in these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Proceed. You may proceed.
Please tell the jury your name.
I am Dakota Jacobs.
Who is your current employer?
Well, currently I am unemployed.
Who was your previous employer?
Kevin Paul, owner of Cameron's Cars, was my previous employer.
What did you do for Cannon's Cars?
Well, I was an assistant. I did the payroll for the shop and I kept it running smoothly, things Cameron should have done.
What led to the fact that you were not employed by Cannon's Cars right now?
Well, on March 12, 2012, I was working at Cameron's Cars on a Panther, working on Cameron's car in the back, and Teddy Rush came in and we got in a bit of a rustle.
Did you know Terry Brush before this day?
Yes, his scammed my parents out of everything they had.
Where were you working on the day of the accident?
I was working back in the bay on the Panther fixing its brakes.
What happened, why did you confront him?
I confronted him because I didn't like how he was acting, bringing in his fancy new cars that he bought money that was scammed out from investors from his pyramid scheme, and I didn't like the way he acted about it, so casual, so I confronted him.
What happened after the fight?
So afterwards, after I had pushed him on the ground because he had shoved me first, I was told by Cameron to go back to the bay and wait there until he came back there, and when he came back, he told me I was fired.
Do you know anyone else who was affected by Brush's scheme?
Well, as I said, my two lovely parents lost their life savings, my childhood home, and their condo on Casper Mountain.
What do you know about Cameron and Cameron's Cars?
Well, Cameron he started up the shop and he's run it, and Cameron, he goes about trying to impress customers with his technical hyper jargon, and he mainly just watches and sometimes checks the cars.
How does Cameron show off around customers?
He mainly just talks to them and talks all technical mechanics like that to them.
Have you worked on cars similar to Terry's car?
It's unusual for us to work on the Plymouths, but we have had a couple come in.
Can you describe the experience you had with these particular brakes?
These brakes, they're extremely flimsy and they get knocked off extremely easily. And the accident could have just knocked them off by then.
In your opinion, do you think Cameron loosened those brakes and battery cables?
No, Cameron is not a guy who holds grudges for a long time.
There are no more further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
You have a seat? You worked at Cameron's Cars for a long time, didn't you?
15 years to be exact.
Would you consider yourself to be pretty knowledgeable about all the cars?
Most of them, yes.
Do you have any experience working on brake systems?
Yes, as I have stated, I was working on the Panther's brake the same day.
Are you familiar with the type of brake system in Terry Brush's car?
A bit.
Is it possible that the cables could have been knocked loose?
Yes,
The vehicle has dual braking, is this correct?
I believe so.
Dual braking means there are two separate braking systems, is that correct?
Yes.
Loose cables in one system would have caused brake failure for both systems, is that correct?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, it's highly unlikely both brake systems would have failed without human intervention. Isn't that right, Mr. Houston?
I cannot give my opinion on that.
Cameron's shop for a bit. Cameron's car shop that specializes in European cars, isn't it?
Yes, we do.
Is there a change in the European car?
Well, the steering wheel's on the other side.
Is it an American car?
The Plymouth? No.
You were in the shop on March 12th when Mr. Rush brought his car for servicing, isn't that correct?
Yes, it is.
You did see Terry and Cameron interact with Mr. Rush when you brought in his car that day, didn't you?
Yeah.
Would you say that Cameron was happy to have the chance to work on Mr. Rush's car that day?
He didn't seem mad, I guess. What's substance?
It was stated in your affidavit.
Can I please see that, please?
May I approach the witness?
Okay, so and the greasy, that's typical in a car shop. You work on things and there's a lot of greasy parts on the car.
Did you see Cameron chatting happily with Mr. Bush?
Happily, kind of, not particularly.
Is Cameron usually happy to get to work on Bush's cars?
Well, it is a source of income, so it's good news generally.
Perhaps could it be that he was only happy to see Mr. Bush that day because he gave him an opportunity to do some special work on Bush's brakes?
Well, he just wanted in for a service, that's all I know.
No further questions?
Correct. Next witness.
I'd like to call Cameron Paul up to the stand.
Mr. Paul, so nice to see you again. Mr. Paul, same as before, you're still under oath. Do you realize that? Please proceed. Yes, you may.
Well, I'm Cameron Paul and the proud owner of Cameron's Cars.
What is your relationship with Terry Rush?
Well, we're not two peas in a pod, but I don't like him much, but we don't hate each other outright.
How do you feel after you lost all that money?
Well, you would be mad if you lost $250,000, wouldn't you? But as time goes on, you learn to get over things and my temper fades away.
You mentioned your business of Cameron's Cars. Tell me how you started that business.
Well, I had to pull myself all the way up from the bottom. I had dropped out of college, I had a little few bar fights in the past, but then I started to get my act together. I went to college, got my GED, and then I started working at an auto repair shop, and I've been working there for a while, and the customers wanted me to open a repair shop, so I promised them and myself that I would open a repair shop. 5 years later, I opened an extremely successful repair shop, and it's now the envy of all the other repair shops in Carter City.
Were you in your shop on March 12, 2012?
Yes. Brown came in and kind of just started accusing me of things, so, well, he accused me that I had caused the accident, and I learned about the accident from him. That's the first I had heard about it.
What made you feel like they were accusations rather than questions?
Well, they felt like accusations because Brown's never really liked me, and in the past he's accused my car shop of cheating him on a service that his car came in, and we don't cheat our customers. We take every job seriously and treat them all equal.
Have you had any previous relationships with Alex Brown?
Other than when he had his car serviced, and not really, but he's always been wanting to get back at me from when he accused us of cheating him on doing work on his car.
Can you describe your relationship with Mr. Brown?
I'm more neutral to him, but when he comes in and starts accusing me, I do take offense to that, and I will get a bit defensive, like when I told him that he needed a warrant because I felt like I was being unfairly treated.
So in your mind, do you think that Mr. Brown
Service, it had come in for a basic service, so we just serviced, I'd assume, oil and gas.
How do you feel that now that Mr. Brush is dead?
Well, I'm kind of actually disappointed because now I cannot testify in federal court and possibly be reinstituted my $250,000, so I've lost the $250,000 now.
Can you explain how you were going to reclaim your money?
Well, if we would have gone to court against Terry Brush and testified against him, there was the possibility of being reinstituted, the money that we had lost to him and putting him behind bars.
Were you the only one affected by Mr. Brush's scheme?
No, but No, many people in Color City were. I'm not the only one who was cheated by him, and the reason I'm here is because Mr. Brown has me in his crosshairs.
There are no further questions on this call.
Cross-examination.
Will you proceed?
You may.
Mr. Paul, you do not like Mr. Brush, do you?
Not particularly.
And you lost $250,000 when you invested it with Mr. Brush, correct?
And I was planning to reclaim it.
Yes or no, Wilbur, please?
Yes.
You considered that investment to be a pretty bad decision, didn't you?
Yes, when you lose that much money.
Yes or no, please? In fact, you considered it the worst mistake of your life, right?
Yes.
You blamed your loss on Mr. Brush, didn't you?
For the most part.
And you have history with the law involving bar fights, correct?
In my past, yes.
And Mr. Paul, is it true that you have a no temper?
I've resolved it in the past.
Okay, Mr. Paul, we're just gonna back up a little bit. Let's talk about your shop. You take great pride in your work, don't you?
I do?
And you've been doing auto repair work for a long time now, haven't you?
Yes.
You've made your way up from being a high school dropout to being a highly respected professional.
Yes.
You're a smart person, aren't you, Mr. Paul? I mean, you dropped out of high school, but it wasn't because you didn't have the intelligence to pass, right?
Yeah, but afterwards I got my
Yes
GED.
or no, please?
Yes.
You've had to work and learn a lot to do. You've had to work hard and learn a lot to get as far as you have, haven't you?
Yes.
Would you consider yourself to be an expert in auto repairs?
On most cars.
If someone brought you a car in that you didn't have the expertise to work on, you would let them know, wouldn't you?
Yes.
You wouldn't have worked on Mr. Brush's car if you didn't understand how it worked, would you?
Well, if I didn't know,
Yes or
yes.
no, please? Good. I'm sure you wouldn't have developed such a strong business if you weren't good at what you do. I commend you for that, Mr. Paul. So let's talk about the braking system on Mr. Brush's car. Do you have knowledge of the braking system in the Plymouth charge?
It's regenerative.
You understand how the regenerative brake system works then, don't you?
Through electric?
Yes or no, please?
Yes.
And you also understand how standing friction brakes work, don't you?
With friction?
If you understand how they do work, then it seems reasonable that you would probably also understand how they don't work, right?
Yes.
You do understand that the car has a dual braking system and both systems would have to fail in order for the brakes to fail?
Correct.
Do you have any idea, as an expert in auto repairs, as to what could go wrong that might lead both braking systems to spin and eventually fail?
Many, many things.
Lieutenant Brown came to your shop the day after the accident, isn't that correct?
Yes.
You don't particularly like Lieutenant Brown, do you?
He doesn't like me either.
And in your affidavit, you did say that he is a bad cop, correct?
Yes, because he's going after me.
Yes or no?
Yes.
He asked you some questions about the service work that had been done on Mr. Brush's car, correct?
Correct.
He asked you some questions about, you got worried when he asked you about what work you had done, isn't that true?
After he accused me, yes.
You got worried because you thought Lieutenant Brown might be suspicious that you had something to do with the accident?
Yes.
Did Lieutenant Brown accuse you of doing something wrong or just question?
It felt like accusing,
But it was just questions, correct?
depending which way you look at it.
Yes or no, please?
Yes.
So, he didn't actually accuse you, you just got worried, correct?
I felt defensive because the way he was treating me.
Yes or no, will work, please. So you told him that you didn't even know if your shop had ever worked on Mr. Brush's car, correct?
Correct.
You knew full well that Mr. Brush's car had been in the shop for servicing just the day before of the
Yes,
accident,
that was
correct?
the only lie I told.
You lied to an officer of the law during the course of an investigation, didn't you?
The investigation had not
Yes
been
or no,
opened.
please?
No. The investigation has not been opened yet.
Okay. But you only lied because you were nervous about being accused of wrongdoing?
Yes.
I imagine you have to be pretty nervous right now, being as you are in fact being charged with first-degree murder.
Yes, undoubtedly.
But you want this court to believe you when you say that you didn't do any work on Mr. Brush's car that day?
I just checked it.
And in addition to lying, Mr. Paul, you also said that if Mr. Brown wanted to talk to you more.
Irrelevant.
In addition to lying, Mr. Paul, you also said that if Mr. Brown wanted to talk anymore, he would need a warrant, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just make sure we are perfectly clear on this. One answer, and let's make sure this is the truth. You in fact were the last person at your shop who had access to Mr. Brush's car the day of the accident, correct?
That I know of.
And you did get underneath Mr. Brush's car that day, didn't you?
To check that the service was unconnected.
You had to break up the fight between Dakota Jacobs and Terry Brush, right?
Yes.
And you say you weren't working on the car, just looking?
Yes.
But yet when you broke up the fight between those two, when you put your hand on Dakota Jacobs' shirt, you happen to have some silicone stuff on your hand, right?
It's greasy, it's a repair shop, you'll have things on your hand.
Yeah, but you were just looking at the car, you didn't work on it, right?
Well, I might have touched a few parts that was greasy.
Okay, thank you. I do have one more thing I would like to clarify. In your affidavit, you stated that you don't know anything about unusual compounds of silicone or slow-release compounds containing nitric acid, isn't that correct?
Correct.
And no one else in any of the reports mentioned slow-release compounds that contain nitric acid, isn't that correct?
Correct.
Okay, no further questions then?
Redirect.
What were you doing to plan to do?
Can you please?
Sorry, counsel, could you speak up?
What were you doing to plan, or what were you planning doing to dream over that?
As I've said before, I was planning to go to trial against Terry Brush to reinstitute my money and put him on bond.
Thank you very much, sir. You may step down. Any further witnesses from the defense?
That concludes our witnesses.
Thank you to the counsel for the parties. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I understand that you have received your packet of instructions, which I trust you will go through fine-tooth comb and abide by fully, but you have the case. Oh, I'm so sorry. Forgot about closings. Closing arguments for the state.
Yes. May I please the court?
Yes.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Cameron Paul is here today because he's been charged with first-degree murder. This is a difficult charge to make and a difficult accusation to prove. But today, the testimony given by the prosecution's witnesses, along with the cross-examinations performed by our attorneys, have done just that. The first witness called by the prosecution today, Officer Alex Brown, lead investigative officer and eyewitness to the accident which caused Mr. Brush's death, conveyed to the court the details of the accident which led him, a seasoned officer of the law, to suspect foul play and pursue a homicide investigation. He told you how the brake lights of Mr. Brush's Plymouth charge illuminated as it neared the intersection, establishing that Mr. Brush did put his foot on the brake pedal. Next, he told you how, despite this fact, there was no evidence that the brakes had activated. Mr. Brush careened uncontrollably through the intersection, veered to the right, and crashed into a utility pole, at which point he was ejected from his vehicle. The injuries he sustained in this accident will prove fatal. Mr. Andretti, the prosecution's second witness, was established as an expert before this court. Due to his master's degree in electrical engineering and personal involvement in the development of the Plymouth Charger's unique braking system, this was clearly a deserved definition. His investigation revealed that it would have been impossible for a simultaneous failure of both the regenerative and standard friction braking mechanisms to have occurred, leading him, an expert as defined by this court, to conclude that the brakes in the system undoubtedly had been tampered with. His investigation also revealed an inorganic and suspect chemical compound used to erode the brake cables, which the defendant, without prompting, identified as. Now, the opposition has tried to change the focus of this case. They've tried to convince you that perhaps a heart attack or an unsafe level of adlerinium in the man's bloodstream is what led to his death. Does this explain the blunt force trauma? Does this explain his being ejected from his vehicle, flying 30 feet through the air, and landing on the roadway? They said that perhaps he was texting and driving. Maybe he wasn't able to put his foot on the brake before he entered the intersection. Well, we have an officer of the law who has testified to you today that his brake light's wrong. He did indeed put his foot on the brake pedal. They've said he was speeding through the intersection. Well, if you do not have your brake pedal, which you use to regulate your speed, it's going to be difficult to slow down. You have heard about this heart attack from a pharmacist. A pharmacist who, as a result of this investigation, received $25,000 for his testimony. That's a lot of money for someone who works in pharmaceuticals. He would probably be pretty inclined to give some favorable information. And lastly, the defense has tried to tell you that perhaps, just maybe, it was someone else who tampered with the brake mechanisms, that perhaps someone else in the shop had access to them. But Mr. Paul testified to you today that he was the last one under the vehicle. There have been 2 other witnesses who have testified to that fact. He did a final check because he takes pride in the work his shop does. He wants to make sure that the work was done properly. So if he had done this final check and allowed a car, which an expert witness said had to have been tampered with before being released, back onto the streets, is that not in itself murder? He's a better mechanic than that. He owns the mechanic shop, which is the envy of all others in Carter County. He would not have allowed that job back out on the street. In closing, today we were charged with proving to you beyond reasonable doubt that the defendant did knowingly and with premeditated malice kill Mr. Terry Brush. And we have done exactly that. It is now up to you to return a just verdict and to ensure that a murderer does not go free. The prosecution rests.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, prosecution, my fellow counsels. Before I make my case, I want to clarify that you as the jury need to base your verdict on whether or not the accused has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt that he is guilty, meaning that there cannot be a single iota of doubt if you convict him of being guilty. Holding the fate of a man in your hands, is it reasonable to conclude that without any solid foundation, that our client, Cameron Paul, should be convicted of such a terrible crime? Terry Brush was responsible for the monetary losses and downturns of many people, totaling in millions of dollars that went straight into his pocket. Nearly everyone in Carter City wanted this man dead. Dakota Jacobs worked at Cameron's car. He was a victim of Terry's pyramid scheme. His parents lost everything because of that scheme. He had a silicone sealant similar to that found in the Brush vehicle. He even got into a physical altercation with Brush. Of course, this is all speculation, just like it is with Cameron Paul. In our modern justice system, speculation like this is completely unfair. And if that can be said for anyone else who was affected by Terry Brush's pyramid scheme, then how could it not be applied to Cameron Paul? There's absolutely nothing to substantiate these findings. And they want to discredit our witnesses by saying that the burden of proof is on us. It's not. They are trying to prove, without, again, any solid foundation, that Cameron Paul is responsible for Terry Brush's murder. There are innumerable possibilities as to what may have caused it, including mechanical failures may have been the results of the wreck. The fact that Cameron Paul is the last person under the vehicle does not immediately incriminate him as being the one responsible for tampering with it, if it even was. And plus, there is substantial evidence to support the claim that it could have very well been the result of chemicals in Terry Brush's bloodstream. All this, again, all this being said, a speculation like this isn't fair, and how could it be for Cameron? That's risk.
You have heard from the defense that sufficient fact was not provided to convict this man. I would argue otherwise. The entire case which we have built today is upon factual basis. We have done numerous investigations. We have seen that the brakes were applied. We have heard that Mr. Paul is the last one under the car, not Mr. Jacobs, not any other mechanic that is shown. We have heard that there was a man. Deceased. This is not a fact. There is no evidence that he would indeed receive the $250,000 which he lost. And in all chances he wouldn't have, because so many people have lost their money to this man. It would be impossible to restitute everyone for the losses which they had suffered. And I would just like to go back one last time and look at the fact that
And now, shall we give it to the jury? And did you want me to give some
Your Honor,
feedback without the jury?
Please, if we can dismiss the jury, we can give them a chance to return to school. They can deliberate tomorrow, and then please, if you'll talk shop with both counsels, that'd be great.
Wait, hold on, we don't get to find out who wins until tomorrow?
Oh, that's involved.
That's not fair.
Well, we'll get them back to school, maybe they can do deliberating there.
Yeah, they're gonna forget all this. Yeah, I'm gonna forget all of it. I'm not even saying.
Just decided today.
All rise.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I would just say that as you get older, remember that jury service is a bedrock constitutional foundation of this country, and it is one of the most important things that people can do in our legal system.